Now let's talk about China. Xi Jinping's pet project, the Belt and Road Initiative, has suffered a setback. Italy is a member of the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, and now Italy wants to leave. The decision is not official yet, but the writing is on the wall. The Italian defense minister has spoken his mind. His name is Guido Crosetto. He was discussing the BRI agreement. He said Italy's decision to join the BRI was quote-unquote improvised and atrocious. Now they want to leave, but they're not sure how to leave. Listen to what the minister said, and I'm quoting, "The issue today is how to walk back from the BRI without damaging relations with Beijing, because it is true that China is a competitor, but it is also a partner." Then Italy's Prime Minister spoke about this, Giorgia Meloni. She gave an interview on Sunday. She was asked if Italy would stay or leave. Meloni said they haven't made a decision yet, but they will by December. And which way is she leaning? It seems Giorgia Meloni wants to exit with minimal damage. She wants to leave the Belt and Road, but also maintain a trade relationship with China. Listen to her statement, and I'm quoting again. "You can have good relations with China without the Belt and Road Initiative. But it's something, in my opinion, has to be discussed with Chinese government and well inside of the Italian parliament. But anyway, we will take a decision before December." This is what the Prime Minister said. Now, Italy, we know, is in an awkward situation, the odd one out in BRI, the only G7 member in this Chinese project. G7 is a group of 7 largely Western economies that were once the world's richest. Italy is a member of this club, the G7, and it signed up for the BRI. This happened in the year 2019, and it was a big coup for Beijing. In fact, Xi Jinping went to Rome himself for this. He took a victory lap when Italy agreed to sign this deal. The Chinese president said, "This partnership will benefit both parties."
We agreed that we need to strengthen synergies between the two parties and our respected development strategies to enhance collaboration in the infrastructure, ports, logistics, and shipping sectors. The goal is to build concrete and quality projects along the Silkway.
Italy was reeling from a debt crisis, so the collaboration with Beijing made sense in 2019. But it hasn't been a win-win like Xi Jinping promised them. Trade between the two countries remains lopsided. It is tilted heavily in Beijing's favor. In May 2023, China's exports to Italy were worth over $4 billion. But Rome sent back less than $3 billion worth of goods. Now, there is a brake on investments too. Italy signed up for the BRI under the leadership of Giuseppe Conte. Conte allowed a series of large investments, but his successor, Mario Draghi, was wary. He blocked several Chinese acquisitions in Italy. And where does the current leader, Giorgia Meloni, stand? Well, she's a hardliner. She wants closer economic integration with the West. This month, she visited Washington and she vowed to improve trade ties with the US.
The United States is our most important trade partner outside the European Union. And I do agree with you, Joe, that our trade partnership is very high, but no reason why we could not improve it.
But she cannot improve ties with the US until she quits the BRI. So what's the roadblock? The major problem is negotiating this exit. Italy fears a retaliation from China. A former Italian diplomat has spoken about this. His name is Stefano Stefanini. He was Italy's ambassador to NATO. And he described Rome's dilemma in these words. Given the state of relations between the US and China, we cannot remain an ally of the US and at the same time remain in the BRI. We have to try to negotiate a peaceful or the least damaging possible exit with the Chinese. And this is what the Italian leader, Meloni, has to navigate. A clear path for Italy's exit from the Belt and Road Initiative. And she needs time till December for this, she says. Here is what might help her. China's falling investments. Beijing is pouring less money into the BRI now, and I have some numbers. In 2020, China invested more than $60 billion in the BRI. The next year, in 2021, the funding fell to a little over $56 billion. There was a surge of bad loans. In the last 3 years, investments worth $78 billion have been affected. And these were loans that turned sour for Beijing. Either the debt was renegotiated or it had to be written off. So Giorgia Meloni could always argue that the BRI is no longer an attractive proposition for her country. But she's banking on the West to step up to offer the kind of money that China brings to the table. Can the US and Europe match up? And is that a game that they want to play? We should have our answers by December. Doksuri is a Korean word. It means eagle, the majestic bird. But now its meaning seems to have changed, at least for China. For many in China, Doksuri has become synonymous with destruction because this name is shared by a typhoon, one of the strongest ones to make landfall in China. It hurtled into the country last week. Now, the remnants of Doksuri are passing through Beijing and leaving destruction in their wake. Roads have turned into rivers. Torrential rainfall has broken records in the capital. At least 2 people have died, hundreds are trapped, tens of thousands have evacuated their homes. Is respite in sight? Our next report tells you.
These horrific visuals come from Beijing, where a road crumbled into the river below. Record rainfall is ravaging the Chinese capital due to Typhoon Doksuri. It has caused severe flooding that has engulfed Beijing. 2 people have been reported dead. More than 31,000 people have been evacuated from their homes in the city. Railway lines have suffered serious damage. Thousands of passengers were evacuated from trains. Work has halted on over 4,000 construction sites. Cars are being swept away by gushing waters, sometimes with people sitting inside them. One such case was seen in Beijing over the weekend, where a man was trapped in his car while it was pinwheeling down a flooded river. The man was desperately trying to crawl out. Eventually, he was saved by firefighters. But Beijing isn't the only affected area in China. Doxuri made landfall in the country on Friday and quickly became one of the strongest typhoons to ever hit the country. Areas like Hebei, Tianjin and Shaanxi are severely affected. The destruction is widespread. Doxuri downed power lines, uprooted trees.
We pruned and strengthened those trees before Doxuri arrived, but the typhoon was so forceful and those big trees still fell down. The traffic has already been restored.
Doxuri affected about 900,000 people in coastal areas.
There are 880,000 people impacted by floods in the Fujian province. Around 35,014 people are currently in the evacuation centers. According to our initial calculations, the economic loss is around 478 million, but it is still being finalized.
About half of those impacted have now resettled elsewhere. Others are wading through thigh-high floodwaters. Some of the worst affected are the elderly. The security cam footage comes from Shandong, where a bus driver battles the raging waters and tries to pull an elderly man out of the floods. Several passers-by immediately join in rescuing the man, and while he was saved, several are still trapped.
The ground floor of most apartment buildings was already submerged, while in some apartment buildings, the flood has reached the first floor.
We encountered mudslides and landslides when we were on the way to the disaster area, and we had to clear the area with the other rescuers to create a safe path.
Now, Doxuri is tapering off after causing monumental damage to China, worth over $66 million in economic losses. So, is there relief on the horizon? Not really. Heavy downpours are expected to continue in the country. There are increased concerns of floods and landslides. Rainfall is expected to ease midweek, but even so, China is already preparing for its next typhoon, the sixth one this year, called Kanun. It is already gathering strength. Storm tides are expected to hit coastal areas this week, and landfall is projected later this year. China is clearly reeling from extreme weather this year. First, it braved a summer where heat waves scorched the country. Now it's drowning in water, and caught in between are its citizens who are just trying to stay afloat.
And now let's turn our attention to the US. An unusually hot summer is sweeping the nation. Americans are finding ways to beat the heat. Many of them are venturing to freshwater bodies. Sounds like a summer dream, but for some people, it is turning out to be quite the opposite. They've contracted brain-eating amoeba. That's right, amoeba that devours the brain. And they died from it. It's a rare but deadly infection. If someone catches it, there's a 97% chance of death. Thousands of such cases have been seen across the world. So how can you recognize this infection and how can you avoid it? Our next report tells you.
This is an amoeba. You know, the fascinating shapeshifter. Many of us drew it with precision back in school biology lessons, though not much precision was required, because this is a unicellular organism with the ability to alter shape. Science being science doesn't leave it at that though. It has analyzed different kinds of amoeba and declared several types. One of them is called Naegleria fowleri. It's a famous one. The name sounds slightly complicated, which is probably why it has a nickname, and an apt one. This is called brain-eating amoeba, and it's just as deadly as it sounds. Recently, the amoeba claimed its latest victim, a man in the US state of Georgia. The amoeba destroyed his brain tissue, and he died from it, much like the 2-year-old boy from Nevada who died from the infection earlier this month. But before we talk about the latest cases, let's start with the basics. How does this amoeba spread its disease? It infects the body and causes damage to the brain, hence the name. It lives in soil and freshwater lakes, rivers, ponds, and hot springs, basically warm environments. It's not found in saltwater like in oceans or properly treated swimming pools. It enters the body while someone is in the freshwater, like when they're swimming, submerging, or even splashing. The water enters the body through the nose, so does the amoeba, and then it travels to the brain. What do the symptoms look like? They usually come on strong, and they progress rapidly, within 5 days of contracting the disease. They include headache, fever, nausea, and vomiting. Later, the situation worsens and symptoms increase. They progress to stiff neck, confusion, seizures, hallucinations, and coma. And all of this usually leads to death. The infection kills about 97% of the people it infects. It's often a losing battle. There is no consensus on effective treatment against it. Brain-eating amoeba may be fatal and hard to detect. But it is also rare to contract this infection. According to the WHO, anywhere between 1 to 2,000 cases have occurred globally. They are mainly seen in Australia, Europe, and the US. In the past 5 years, the US has seen 3 cases each year, and cases have been on the rise worldwide. Now, while this amoeba is a cold-blooded murderer, it likes warmth. Because of climate change, our world is heating up, so more places are warmly welcoming this amoeba. For instance, most infections in the US happened during the summer, and they happened in the south. But in the past few years, they have been moving upwards. Infections are cropping up farther north during bouts of extreme heat. Only last year, this amoeba was identified in South Korea for the first time. In India, the first case was detected in 2016 in the state of Kerala. Following this, there have been a few cases in the country, mainly in the southern states. The most recent one also came from Kerala this month. So, more countries are seeing cases of this infection. It's as rare as it's deadly. Since 1962, only 4 people have survived it. So, how can you avoid it? Experts say assume it's present in every freshwater body, so avoid jumping in. But if you can't, try keeping your head above the water, because it could save you, both literally and metaphorically.
There was a big cricket final yesterday. Some 370 runs were scored. One of the captains also hit a century. But chances are you did not hear about it. Do you know why? Because this match did not happen in Mumbai or Karachi or Melbourne. It happened in Dallas, in the United States of America. Now I know what you're thinking. Do people even watch cricket in the US? Well, most of them don't. And that's what this new cricket league is hoping to change. It is called MLC, or Major League Cricket. The first season has just been completed. 6 teams were involved this time. Some of their names will ring a bell, like Los Angeles Knight Riders or Mumbai Indians New York or Texas Super Kings. These teams are owned by Indian Premier League clubs. They're basically IPL subsidiaries. MI New York won yesterday's match. They were crowned the inaugural champions. But how was the local response? Well, it's a bit complicated. Don't think of the MLC like you think of the IPL. The IPL is worth around $15 billion. The MLC has only invested around $180 million. So let's not even compare the two. The infrastructure is also not up to the mark. Most of the matches were played in baseball stadiums. They had to be converted to play cricket. Nonetheless, the local participation was good. Most matches were sold out. A majority of the crowd was made up of South Asians. The league has big plans, in fact, in the coming years. All 6 teams have committed to building home stadiums. They also have some savvy investors. The team from Seattle, for instance, is co-owned by Satya Nadella. He's the CEO of Microsoft. The team from Texas is co-owned by Ross Perot Jr. He's a prominent businessman, also the son of a former presidential candidate. The big highlight is the South Asian participation, mostly Indian Americans. As a business decision, it makes perfect sense. Indian Americans have the money, they have the political clout, they also have the interest. So if you want to grow cricket in the US, you can't do it without Indian Americans. But that alone is not going to be enough. Let me show you some numbers. Cricket has around 4 million fans in the United States. Cycling has almost double that. Basketball has 48 million. Baseball, 53 million. So cricket has a long way to go. And don't think this is just a private sector project. The ICC, or the International Cricket Council, is also on the job. They have awarded next year's T20 World Cup to the US and West Indies. 4 American cities will host matches. They're also looking to include cricket in the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. So there is a big roadmap already in place. But what explains the sudden interest in the US? Why does cricket want to crack America? For starters, there is big money. Let me show you a comparison. During the IPL playoffs, advertisements in fact cost around $90,000. That's $90,000 for a 30-second video. Guess how much the Super Bowl charges? $7 million. The North American market is massive. The ad money, the streaming money, the ticket costs, all of this is much higher than anywhere in the world. And that's one reason. The second reason is this. Cricket needs an expansion plan. It is the second most watched sport on the planet. Around 2.5 billion people watch cricket. But most of them are from one region, the Indian subcontinent. You take that out and cricket loses all the money and relevance. Consider this. The next FIFA World Cup will have 48 teams. But the next Cricket World Cup will have only 10. It remains a game limited to Britain's former colonies. The goal is to break away from that, to get more and more countries to play cricket. And I know all of this sounds exciting, especially if you're watching us from India, but this is all easier said than done. Cricket is a grassroots game. You need to have proper systems right down to the local district. Only then can you field a good national team. Can the US build such a system? More importantly, do they want to build such a system? You can't bank only on South Asian support to build cricket in America. You need non-immigrants to get hooked. And how do you do that? Easy, by building a good team. Indians are hooked on cricket because our teams do well. Same with Australia or England or South Africa. No one wants to see their country lose, and knowing the Americans more so. If the US can field a good side, maybe win some matches, then things will change. Which is why the MLC is so important. It can give American cricketers more exposure, it can create the best infrastructure, and of course, the money helps. If cricket can establish itself in the US, it could set the stage for further expansion. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story, starting with a visual treat for all the adventure junkies out there, in fact. An athlete walked the world's longest single building slackline in Qatar. The slackline was at a height of over 185 meters. It was only about 2 centimeters wide. A word of caution, please do not try something like this on your own. In the United States, a fisherman celebrating his birthday got to see a sight so rare that even marine scientists are in awe. He saw 3 humpback whales jumping in perfect synchronization. The man called it a once-in-a-lifetime experience. In California, a man walked into his backyard only to find a bear making the most of his jacuzzi. Temperatures are rising and everyone has simple bare necessities. Excuse the Jungle Book pun. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1971, Apollo 15 became the first mission to use the lunar roving vehicle. Previous teams of astronauts were restricted to short walking distance around the landing site, and this was because of bulky space suits. But lunar roving vehicles changed the game. They offered greater surface mobility. Fun fact, it took only 17 months to develop this technology. Experts say many scientific discoveries made in the consecutive Apollo missions would not have been possible without these lunar roving vehicles. And a quick update before we go. If you miss our live show at 9 p.m. IST, do not worry. You can now catch a repeat at 7:30 a.m. on weekdays. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Copy. We're at all mechanics now.
I'm bringing.
Oh, you guys get ready.
Transmitted copy. We're at all mechanics now.
I'm bringing.
Oh, you guys get ready.